What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 281. I'm one of the co-hosts. My name is Steve, and I'm here today, as always, with
Ron?
And John.
And we got a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
I know we're trying to keep this nice and tight, but we got a lot of stuff happening. We're recording this on Thursday night, December 10th, which is also the evening, late afternoon, early evening when Disney had their investor call, which is like a mini D23 basically.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot to talk about with that, which we will kind of go through some of it briefly. And then there's a couple releases, theatrical. Well, I don't know, theatrical. Wow, I said theatrical. There's a big movie coming out Christmas Day, the new Paul Greengrass movie, News of the World, that we're going to talk about a little bit. A couple of us were able to see it. We're going to talk about that movie. I think we're going to talk a little bit about Freaky, and maybe also about the Russell Crowe, what is that, thriller, Unhinged, right?
I mean, it's like a slasher movie.
Almost.
I would argue that Unhinged is one of the first new ideas for what could, like, something that could become a slasher franchise I've seen in a while, that feels like it's cleverly constructed to be something that could happen to almost anybody, which is kind of your slasher premise, right?
Right. So yeah, I guess, that's the back half
Unhinged.
of the episode. We'll get into some of these reviews. But first, I guess let's get into this a little bit. I mean, we're kind of literally recording this as it's wrapping up, so news is kind of still trickling out of this investors call. But we were talking about this on our text thread off and on, because basically, over the last couple of weeks, a lot of news coming out with the HBO Max announcement with Warner Brothers and the 2021 slate coming to HBO Max, day and date with theatrical releases where theaters are open. So a lot of conversations been going on about, what's Disney going to do with, a lot of their titles that they have coming up, a lot of their stuff that they have coming to the streaming service that maybe aren't movies, that are, series, what's going on with the Marvel series, what's going on with Star Wars. And I think for the most part, I think a lot of questions have been answered with this investors call. And a lot of cool new announcements of things that really, I don't think many people knew anything about. At least speaking for myself, I had no clue of some of these things even being in pre-production, both from Star Wars, Marvel, Pixar, even Hulu announcements that were pretty awesome. But I don't know, what do you guys, coming off it? I know you caught some of the little teasers that they posted, but any quick thoughts before we talk about some of these specific announcements? I mean, in general, Disney's announcements, the call in general, like what are you thinking right now?
I watched the whole thing, and what I've gathered is don't panic. I mean, the thing is, they haven't changed anything. The schedule seems to be kind of on par with what we heard before through rumblings of, rumored shows and stuff like that. You're right. We did hear about some new shows, but they're not coming out anytime soon. Mm-hmm. Have they had a visceral reaction to whatever HBO's have? I heard a little swipe at Game of Thrones, but besides that, nothing really. They're a little unmoved. The thing is, unfortunately, they're probably going to have to make a move in 2021 because people just aren't going to be going to theaters. So whether they showed this sort of like stoic face for their investors,
Right.
and then they're going to do something totally different in a couple months, seems to be what it's going to be, unless they compress this sort of year and then put that into 2022, because people just aren't going to go to movie theaters right now. Despite a vaccine coming, despite everybody isn't going to take the vaccine, everybody isn't going to be ready to go into theaters. So it's a little strange. I mean, it would have been weird if they were just like, everything's going to Disney Plus, but it also is weird that they didn't react at all. It's just like, I don't know.
One of the things I found interesting, like mentioning the HBO comparison, is that I think a lot of people were talking about Disney's attempt with Mulan and how they had like that premiere access.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like a flex, I guess, on their part, that they still have doubled down on, I think, the idea of some things will go to Disney Plus and will be a part of your subscription. For example, Soul coming out on Christmas Day, a huge Pixar movie.
Huge movie.
That apparently it's apparently great. But then they announced that the film Raya and the Dragon that's coming out, I think it's like the second quarter of 2021, it is going to Disney Plus, but it is still maintaining that model that Mulan had, where it's going to be a premier level of access, whatever the price point is, if it's the same or if it changes. But they have delineated that. They have made that clear that a lot of these movies that they've announced, and you notice in the investor call, some of those icons on the screen, it would show the Disney Plus, like with the premiere access next to it.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them would say only on Disney Plus, and it would just be Disney Plus. So some of these movies that they're saying are coming to the streamer, it's obvious that I don't know how they're earmarking them, but some of them are going to be something that you do pay for still on top of your membership. And I'm curious to see kind of what we see those titles becoming. And yeah, the criteria that they use to decide it is something that'll be interesting in the coming, I guess, couple quarters of 2021.
Yeah.
What about you, John? Like, what's your take? You know, what you were able to watch, or I know you were catching up on some of the trailers and the clips that they were releasing.
Yeah, like right up to the last minute before we started doing this, they were posting some clips, things we've heard talked about for a while. You know, like the Loki trailer, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier trailer, and the WandaVision trailer are all three of those. That's our best look yet at a concept we heard was coming. And I was, you know, I thought Owen Wilson and Tom Hiddleston together on an elevator that's a show for me.
Yeah, that's it.
Like, but I think that also the way that you're getting a little bit of a tease of the storylines. Honestly, I think that's what my takeaway from any of this is that I'm excited about where these stories might be going. I mean, I'm one of those Star Wars fans who's enjoyed the way that The Mandalorian has given us a different way in to this world. And I think the shows they've announced for Star Wars have that opportunity to be another set of different ways in, maybe to some familiar stuff. Obviously, the biggest announcement on the Star Wars side is probably Patty Jenkins doing Rogue Squadron.
Yeah.
Her description of why she wants to do that movie, which again, they've said movie, right? I didn't miss that. It's not a show.
Yeah, it's a movie. Yep. The next Star Wars film.
So like, who knows where it fits in the timeline? Who knows what it is really, except that it's about theoretically an X-Wing squadron. But I mean, I think that's the one thing that can be a little confusing, but also a little exciting about Star Wars at the moment, is that the question, where does it fit into the timeline, can be a little bit frustrating if you have to sort of lay it out for somebody. But I also think the notion that they can go to someplace really new in the timeline and just do something different and stick to a concept, because it could be a project that only has to do its own thing and not you know, support a trilogy or even connect back to these other movies. So I think that's the exciting part for me out of all this, is just the storytelling opportunities. Like the WandaVision trailer, the little hint of what the story is we got from this most recent one seems really unusual and trippy. And when I forget the great character actress who's in that, playing like the wacky neighbor, it looks like. Someone help me with her. She was on Parks and Rec.
Oh yeah, I forgot her name.
Well, I should know her name. Anyway, when she says, "Are you here to help us?" in this like tense way, I was like, "Oh boy, this seems like it's like a fantasy of Scarlet Witch's creation, but it might be something darker than that, or something kind of coming from the outside." So I don't know. I'm just glad to see that those stories look interesting and fun. And you know, Henry was just saying to me the other day, "What are you excited about right now, Dad?" Because we usually look at trailers together and talk about what movies we kind of can't wait to go see, and it's been a while for us to have that type of experience, you know. And then here we are today with like 5 or 6 new clips to watch that we're like, oh, okay, cool. I kind of know what we're going to be watching, or at least what we're jazzed to see for the next few months, because January 15 is WandaVision, and that's soon. But yeah, they didn't put dates on a lot of that stuff. So I do think we're looking at a pretty long timeline. I mean, Rogue Squadron is 3 years out. So all those other Star Wars shows could be as far out or further, depending on what the development process is like.
Yeah. One thing I did take away from the Marvel portion, which was really interesting, and I don't think Kevin Feige's actually done in a physical form, because he's always kind of tweeted like this. But you know how you watch those movies of the detective with the pictures on the screen with the threads going on the board connecting? Yeah. This is the first time that he did it, and I think that comes from the idea that there are so many things happening at once. How is this stuff connected? Who are these people? And one thing that he did that I was not expecting was that he told us that Monica Rambeau's character, played by Tiana Paris, is the daughter of Captain Marvel's best friend. So, like, you know, making those connections very quickly with the viewer, with the investor, is something that, you know, he wasn't doing before. And I think there's a need for it now, because it's getting so damn crazy. You're having 2 timelines happening at the same time. You have the the ones that are going to be on the theatrical screen, which he made very clear, and then the TV world, which is also going to connect these worlds, but they are separate in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
So, so this acknowledgement of both and talking about the connections is something that we kind of maybe needed. And it's cool to see that he cares enough to tell us how these things connect. So,
sure.
Catherine
I agree with you.
Okay, Catherine Hahn.
That's what I thought it was. But I didn't see the new WandaVision trailers. I thought maybe there was a different character. I saw her in the teaser before.
Yeah, well, she's been kind of like part of this kind of sitcom reality in the trailer, and then there's one part where she's got this like strained look on her face, and she says, "Are you here to help us?" And it's like, ugh, so it's like there's some kind of weird nightmare thing that they're all trapped in or something that just seems trippy. But no, I agree with you, Ronald. This idea of how things are connected and that the audience. My general feeling is at this point you're bought in. If you're watching this stuff, you're enough interested to find out what it is you're watching, but each item should do its own job of telling its own story, and bringing in different creators and people with different ideas about what kind of stories should be told in these worlds is the way to do that. And I think that's the cool thing about where they're going with Star Wars is that maybe we will get to finally see some of those true side stories that they talked about when Disney bought Star Wars years ago. The idea that we're going to get to see different people's vision and yet to never reboot, I think is sort of the gift of Star Wars. You can just go to a different part of the galaxy. You can go to a different part of the timeline. You don't have to say, well, who's playing this character now? So no, I think that it's a cool experiment, but how it's all connected, that can be the thing that overwhelms people. I mean, we led up to Endgame with the Marvel movies recently, and right before that movie came out, people were getting extremely fatigued. The casual fans anyway were getting really fatigued with the notion of like, am I just going to see a movie to set up another movie? So let's just hope these things feel unique and discreet enough in the stories they're telling. Because the teams they're putting together and the creative side of it it's always inspiring to see that part.
I think that's why why he kind of said like, this is going to be a mystery. This is going to be a heist. This is going to be, I think that's one of the things that's kind of, it's working on our nerves, man. Let's be honest. It's not new things. It's just, it's in a world that we know already and things are being added onto it. And there's some connective tissue between all of it. So if you're going to do it, make it different. And I love that, WandaVision is the step to do that. Like, if you think about this, like WandaVision, out of all the things that are coming out, it's kind of this like high art that they're trying to present it as. And I think it is. I think it's going to be doing some things and working on some levels that people aren't used to seeing in this world.
Right.
Which will also lend itself to Doctor Strange, obviously, right?
Yeah.
But
that's what they originally said, was that this was going to lead into that, and that is a Sam Raimi movie that purports to be their scariest one yet. They've said it's not a horror movie, but that it will have more elements of horror than other films. So the fact that this has a little bit of an unsettling quality to what's going on, you're right. It feels like a new flavor.
Yeah, this is going to do the heavy lifting for the preparation for you being like, okay, this is going to be like a movie that I'm watching on TV. This is an idea that's going to be a little different from something that I've seen in the theater. So I don't know.
I think that was one of the things that stood out to me on the call, like when Chapek was talking, and other guests that they had talking, was they kept like kind of zoning in on this idea that like a lot of these productions are going into place like without a concept of being for TV or for the theater. Which is a lot of what had to do with Disney's announcement, a couple months back about how they were reorganizing everything, and things are being created not always with the intention of like, this is going to be a theatrical release or this is going to be a Disney Plus original, whatever it might be. So I think that's a big part of their messaging. And I think they did a really good job on the call of like trying to remind everybody of that as much as possible, and to show that the quality of production was never kind of like a sacrifice, like the Cassian Andor series, like we were showing that, like they really were showing the scale.
Yeah.
And because that seemed to be one that they kind of are in production on and can show some stuff.
Yeah,
and
and
obviously like WandaVision, right. And the Falcon and Winter Soldier, all these things, you see the production value, and you can see that like these things are not being nothing's being spared in terms of production for the franchises. Basically, you're saying this is a Star Wars series, just like Mandalorian, like it looks incredible. So like the fact that they have over 10 or more of these things being announced, for Star Wars specifically, and all the new stuff for Marvel, like talking about like the What If series looks really cool. And, them just announcing that, there is going to be a Fantastic Four movie and that John Watts is going to be directing it. Like, I think that's like a cool thing to kind of keep threading this really delicate balance of, you know, what you're used to in the franchises and what the future holds for you or for them and for you, and kind of that bridge between the two. Because I think that these over the top platforms are the bridge. Like Ronald was saying, and you both have been basically saying that, like, the idea of setting expectations and like trying to explain how everything will tie together and how watching something on Disney Plus will afford you the opportunity to understand something that comes out maybe theatrically one day.
Yeah.
Like, that's a unique experience that's really untouched, you know, in media in general. And I think especially to the scale that things like Star Wars and Marvel have kind of built themselves up to be. But yeah, I think in general too, like we've talked about on this podcast, like, you know, a lot of talk around Disney Plus is like that it's basically like a library, that they don't have a lot of like the original stuff, and they don't yet. But I think this call and this conversation they had today is like a really good sign of how much is happening. You know, it's not there yet. And obviously COVID and this pandemic has really kind of delayed a lot of these things. But it's also maybe afforded them the opportunity to really kind of get a better roadmap of where these things should be and where they should go and when we should be able to see them. But I think that's a really big takeaway too, is just simply that, you know, there's a lot of stuff coming out on Disney Plus that is intended to be Disney Plus originals. And, you know, and it's Disney kind of leveraging every piece of IP that they have from our childhood, you know, to current titles. You know, they're really mining, and some would probably say, you know, exploiting maybe in some ways some of their older titles to even kind of get those things going too, which is, I don't know, it's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of big stuff. Go ahead, Ronald.
No, I was just going to say I'm excited, and you're right. There's a lot of big stuff. I think that it's just a matter of I kind of wish that I knew about more stuff in 2021. That's the only thing that I'm taking from this, is that I have no fucking idea beyond Black Widow what's coming out, and I'd like to see some strides to kind of tell people what was coming up in the immediate future.
Yeah.
Another thing that we kind of talked about this off mic was the idea of some adult content coming into Disney Plus. You know, I'd heard that almost a year ago, that was the plan and it was coming soon, and figuring out how to make it work. You know, there's been whispers about it, and it's cool to see that this service is becoming essentially a real contender, and having this stuff versus something original that people aren't really connected to is crazy. Disney is hitting hard. HBO Max hitting hard. So, you know, it's just, how is Netflix going to be able to compete with these two services coming as hard as they have? What do you think is going to, I guess that's the question I wanted to ask you guys.
I mean, I don't know. I maybe look at it as these two guys are trying to compete with Netflix personally.
I get that.
Like, I think that, you know, everybody's kind of playing catch up to Netflix in terms of the streaming wars. But this is where I think these roads are crossing, where the theaters, I mean, the movie studios, the production houses that are traditionally theatrical or network TVs, or they have their cable subscription services, where they really are committing to making stuff exclusively on the streaming platform. So, you know, and I think them doing that is also changing the game for Netflix, because Netflix now has leverage to get their titles in theaters. If theaters are willing to play Warner Brothers films while it's on HBO Max, and also possibly Disney stuff, if it happens similarly, I don't know. But I mean, that'll probably change. But I just think that ever since Disney Plus, which is the real competitor right now to Netflix, you know, with 137 million subscribers, I think they said, you know, I think the idea is, you know, they've always been trying to catch up to Netflix. And I think they're starting to, especially Disney Plus. Honestly, HBO Max is like really behind. Like, their numbers are not very good. And I think this announcement of the whole theatrical window and like the titles coming day and date and Wonder Woman, the next 3 months will be really interesting to see how those numbers change. But Disney's numbers are insane, and they're the real competition right now for Netflix. So, I mean, Netflix spends so much money. Like their production budget is insane. I don't even know. I think it's probably more than these studios, like by a long shot. And so I think just apples to apples, I think they're outspending them already. So I don't know that it's really Netflix catching up to them. I think it's really just the possibility that them trying to catch up to Netflix may open up a new avenue for Netflix, which is put our movies in theaters sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
It'll
do.
blur the line.
Which would be interesting.
I get
Yeah.
what you mean. I think what I mean by that is ultimately maybe this will represent two different types of services. Like to me, this is a realm that's not like I don't think about Netflix still isn't synonymous with theater stuff yet. And maybe
Right.
you're right. Maybe the theaters, maybe them going to theaters and being like, "Oh, this is a this is a Netflix theatrical release." Will represent something different, but it's not.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel the same. You watch these things like Mandalorian. There's no Mandalorian on Netflix yet. So, what I'm saying is like maybe these will be two different lanes. Maybe it'll be like there's a Netflix that has its own original content, and then ones that put out
Right. Their IP.
known IPs that we know, like,
Yeah.
nostalgia and all this stuff. But it's actually things that were supposed to come out in theaters are now on a separate service now. Like it just feels very different. Like I
Yeah.
don't
You're
look
right.
at these as different, as the same service anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They service a different need. They're people that that was like my biggest complaint about Netflix for a really long time. Like, where's the stuff that I know? You know, this is a different category now. It's going to be like
Yeah.
Netflix.
It's all owned by the studios.
Yeah, it's all owned by the studios, and then it's going to be just
They're trying to make their own. They're trying
yeah.
to make their
That's
own.
that's so dope. So like, there might be something in 2-3 years. It's like their Game of Thrones that has
Right.
nothing to do with anything that's outside of the system that we know. I think
Yeah.
that's
You're
pretty
right.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it might be
Definitely.
that they're staking out that brand too, of saying that since they aren't necessarily the holders of all this classic IP, that they would be the people who might be more likely to. I mean, it's always seemed that way anyway, with who Netflix hires and who they'll give a series to. The
Yeah.
fact that some of those shows come out and you kind of forget about them always seemed like a tiny bit of a problem with quality control, but not
Yes.
that you can't say that across the board because Netflix has so many different ways of a show being created, whether they did it with like a lot of development or whether they
Yeah.
picked it up or whether
Yeah.
they just gave somebody trusted some money, are they the ones that made the deal with David Lynch for the series Wisteria? Is that what happened this week? I think
I'm not sure, to be honest.
David Lynch is just signed up with Netflix. Let me check.
Always down for something, David Lynch.
But I mean, that's him doing a new show, David Lynch Netflix project, working title Wisteria. Yeah, so I mean, I just thought of that as an example of the kind of thing that that's the kind of signing they do. It's a creator based thing rather than an
absolutely.
IP
Which
based.
is really
thing.
cool. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So like,
And they
yeah,
get these overall deals with these creators, like Fincher signing an overall deal,
Yeah.
and he's got Mank that just came out last week, and
I
these
haven't
are
seen
like
it, but it looks really
visionary.
interesting.
Yeah, these are like amazing names, like Lynch, David Fincher, and Scorsese did a movie. It's the talent that they get there. It's just like the idea that these filmmakers, these creators, these producers are going to Netflix. Like it is going to be a problem for them in that sense, that if they can also go, that these other platforms are going to start building the similar type of stable, and it's going to be where do they go, and you start to see it kind of the lanes open up a little bit for some of these people to move around between these platforms, because it won't just be Netflix now that's going to be willing to give you money. It's going to be Warner for their HBO Max stuff. It's going to be Disney for Disney Plus stuff. It's going to be whoever. Like, it's just going to be a really interesting change to the entire idea of, like you were saying, Ronald, like that Netflix kind of is viewed differently by a lot of people, including you, that it's like they kind of were the alternative
yeah,
and it kind of became the norm of what most people think of when they think of streaming. And they have so many subscribers that it may be hard for them to pivot to a theatrical option.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so they may
Yeah,
have
it would be.
saturated their user base to the point that why would I go to see a movie if it's included in my subscription?
Yeah.
You know, so that may be a problem for Netflix that they might have to come across and deal with. But
But
I
right
don't know.
now
It's
they're printing money, so that doesn't even matter at
oh
this
yeah,
point, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
They're not
another
the world's worst streaming service like WB is over there at HBO Max. We got to talk a little bit about Christopher Nolan, right? I mean,
yeah, please.
he's the guy who's really angry about all the stuff that we're sort of saying might be kind of exciting. I think we're all people who are going to be staying home a lot for the foreseeable future, and we want to
Yeah.
see these things before
For
2025.
sure.
So that's where a lot of my optimism about this. I think the hand holding between the home and the theatrical, it just makes more sense. We've said this ever since we started doing this show,
Yeah.
that home
Yeah.
theaters are getting more wonderful and theaters are getting like, and again, I think we've all consistently gone to movies. So we've never been people who were going to give up on that theatrical experience.
Yeah.
But as far as like, do I
definitely.
want to wait for the theatrical experience or do I want to see new stuff? I think my desire to see new stuff outstrips my like religious fealty to the notion of the theatrical experience, but I don't think any of us want to see it go away. And what I think of is
No.
when this is all said and done, that handoff between a streaming series and a movie that might have similar themes or characters, you know, it shouldn't be that you need to do it all, but I think it'll be kind of fun, and it will be for these continuing sagas anyway. It'll be a great way for the movies and the TV shows to kind of enrich each other. On the other side, I mean, outside of just the economics of keeping everything running until then, I feel like people are going to be just as hungry for movies in the theater as ever, if not more. I think, you know, right now we're all coming to terms with how much we miss that experience. We haven't really talked about it as much at the top of the show as much as we did earlier in the year, but you know, that was a big thing for us. Every week we were sort of comparing notes on how we're adjusting to this. I think we've all sort of adjusted to it, but I still don't think of it as very normal. And I occasionally have that feeling of like, you know, like you're stuck or something, moving in slow motion, going, God, I'm being patient with this process, but you know, I hate that we're missing out on all this communal fun. And the theatrical experience is something I'll never turn my back on it. But at the same time, I'm not gonna be anything but excited that these big studios have realized that yes, theatrical, like top quality content, there is an audience sitting at home that is dying for that stuff. And so, you know, well, but it's the future.
to lend it, you know, to kind of add on to what you said. So here's something that people, you know, they're acting like movie theaters are dead. People keep saying that, but one thing that people are forgetting is kind of the fact that we're inside as the alternative to getting sick, right? And what that's going to do is it's building this anticipation to participate in public things. And I think when people feel safe, and only at that moment, that's when people start moving around. So
I think you're right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some stuff we've seen. I know we mentioned at the top of the show, we two of the three of us were able, despite great efforts made all around, to see News of the World, the new Paul Greengrass movie. Although I guess you can call it a Tom Hanks movie directed by Paul Greengrass, or you can call it's like a reteaming of these guys, right? From Captain Phillips.
Captain Phillips.
And in this, Tom Cruise again plays a guy who's a captain. Did you notice that, Ronald? Did you think
he
about
was
that
a
throughout?
captain?
He's not just the captain now. He's always the captain. Tom Hanks.
he is the captain.
But I don't know. I mean, I have a soft spot for Westerns that give you a little bit of a different angle than you've seen before, and that walk you through scenes that you've sort of pictured but never quite seen depicted. And Tom Hanks is one of the best actors that's ever lived in terms of bringing you into a story.
Absolutely.
So I found this movie really engrossing on the
Me too.
on the storyline level and the character level. I think if I take a bird's eye view of what it's doing as a movie, I think it's a little bit interesting the way it handles some of the sort of, it's hard to do a Western now without thinking of the kind of politicized side of that, where we're thinking about slavery or we're thinking about the treatment of indigenous peoples in this land. And I think this movie does a good job of paying respect to that, but in a strange way, it almost doesn't deal with it. And that's always a thing we talk about when we talk about period pieces and the like, where we say like, how well does this movie sort of, it's like it looks past a lot of that stuff, but it never pretends it's not real. I don't know that I want to ding the movie, but I did think that was something worth discussing. But I thought it was well made, and the character relationship at the core of the movie of Tom Hanks and I don't know the young actress's name. But no, it was super engrossing. I was hooked from the start by like their rapport and their kind of growing affection for each other as they encounter all this craziness. What about you, Ronald?
Yeah, I felt the same way. I mean, there has to be some acknowledgement of slavery and stuff like that. And, they had a little part at the beginning that I could have dealt without. I could have done without.
I thought of you through that because we've talked about this imagery.
Yeah, it's just like, why is this in here? Why is it in here? It hasn't been scattered throughout the movie. It's just very unnecessary.
And he's a Confederate captain too. We should mention that he's a retired Confederate soldier. So that also adds an element of something to the story.
Yeah. Tom Cruise is just
and Tom Hanks.
Tom Cruise is whatever you're about to say.
Tom Hanks does something. I'm sorry, the audio.
Ronald, can I give you a tip? Whenever you catch yourself doing that, the best thing to do is to be like, Tom Cruise is he's on the record as agreeing with me about this. He loves Tom Hanks just as much as I do.
The program crashed like 3 times in a row. I mean, the thing like crashed 3 times in a row.
Oh, your audio?
Yeah, the audio. That's why I like stopped completely.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's why I said Tom Cruise, because I was like looking over. All right, so Tom Hanks is just one of those people that just doesn't need a lot. It's just him in a room, and he's emoting in a way that just him and that kid are doing some magic, man. Like that, it's just. I never thought about the idea of what Westerns must have represented to our like great grandparents and grandparents, right? It was like this idea that like, these are a lot of the times people coming from other places, traveling across the country, sometimes across the world to get to a place in America. And these stories about going across large plains of land and in the journey that, they heard about through their grandparents must be crazy to see on film, what that represented to them. And, my granddad was obsessed with Westerns, and it was because it was a simple story. He loved complex stories, but I realized that Westerns have more complex stories than I thought. I was like, it's just cowboys killing each other. You're like, no, well, this person assaulted this person, and this person's pregnant by this guy, and he has to go across. I'm like, this is.
And it's all about survival.
Yes.
It's all about survival, especially out on the fringes of what we would think of as polite contemporary society. So yeah, it's crazy when you think about it that way, that it's, for some people, it was just a couple generations back that they may have heard stories about that time.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I thought the same thing when you said the thing about the scene at the beginning, the imagery there, the fact that he's a Confederate captain. The fact that there's a part you just can see when he goes to town. The reason the movie's called News of the World is his job is going from town to town and reading newspapers to people who might be illiterate or who might be just unable to get like newspapers from all over the country or all over the world. But he is instantly presented as this kind of voice of knowledge and compassion. So I did think in the first few minutes, I was like, oh, Tom Hanks, of course. It's like Brad Pitt in 12 Years a Slave. It's like, he's the producer, so he's going to be the most woke guy in the movie. Like Tom Hanks definitely is the most woke retired Confederate captain that probably was ever around in 1870.
That's another thing.
But I liked his level of human compassion, and that's something Tom Hanks brings to a role. On his face, whenever there's like an injustice or something going on that's bad, you sense the weight of it. And I thought that the stakes of what might happen to this little girl became so palpable, and a lot of it has to do with his ability to bring us into that character's goodness. That you almost forget some of these things about how, well, maybe there's no way this guy really could be good by our definition because of the Confederate thing or just because of the time he's in. But yeah, maybe he's an anachronism. Maybe people like that didn't really exist. But I felt like the moral force of his character throughout this whole movie, and it allowed me to kind of deal with some of that stuff we're talking about that they breezed past, because I was like, well, Captain Kidd's doesn't like it either. He's you could see the look on his face when he finds the thing we're talking about. So
I'm sorry, like in the past, like I'm expecting this for the next like 5 years through hook or crook. They're gonna let you know that there were some solid white people that existed, and that bothers me so bad. I just think like, why are we doing this? But if there were to be a person, there were to be considerate, it would be this character. He was so. You're right. The stakes were very apparent. Whenever something happened, he wore the expression that we all had. When you see somebody in the distance, you're like, this person isn't stopping. This person's going to try to kill him. Oh my God! You can see he just wanted to protect that little girl, man. Mm-hmm. And you forget that, like, back in the day, somebody would point at something like, I want that. That's mine. I don't care what you're saying. Sure, you bought that. Sure, that's your family member. Sure, that's your cart. I want that. It's just like, stakes were very high.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed it, man. I thought
Yeah.
it was a great movie. I'd suggest it to anybody. It's a solid movie. It may
It's like
trigger
an adventure story, on
Yes.
top of everything we're saying. It does have it's violent and it's got some bleak aspects.
Yeah.
But it has an adventure quality to it, like an episodic,
Yes.
out of the frying pan into the fire kind of storyline.
And that chemistry, for that alone, the chemistry between the child and the Tom Hanks' character is really dope. I just really enjoyed it. What
is the young actress's name? We've got to say it just because.
Chiwetel Ejiofor.
Helena Zengel is her name, and I did not know her nationality. I guess she might be German or Dutch or something. But again, it's not a wordless performance by a long shot, but she does so much without words that you understand, that when you finally do, there's ways in the movie that you finally do get a window into what she's saying, subtitles at times, but at points, it's so important that he communicate with her, and you see the difficulty they're having. And when they finally find ways to communicate, I mean, it's, you spend enough time with them just together. It's only like, what, a 2-hour movie? It's not long. It feels a little long, like the pace of it is a little slow. But when I think about all the stuff that happens in it, there's a lot of incident in the movie. So I don't know. I think it's just a big kind of well-made movie. I mean, there's a lot to sink your teeth into in this one.
Yeah, it's really beautiful too. The camera work is great. It's just a gorgeous movie. You do feel like, this is a journey. It's intense, and it really does feel like he changes. He starts the movie one way and comes out on the end a different person, and you feel it. You feel it developing. And I think it's a pretty cool thing to watch.
We've seen a lot of movies about like an old asshole who learns to not be an asshole. In this case, it's a movie about like a nice guy who has like a barrier up in his heart, and he learns to he finds the reasons for why he would let it down, and you discover why he's got the barrier up. I don't know. It happens at the same time in the story, don't you think, Ronald? That like you realize that he can't go back to what he thought his life that he had doesn't matter anymore. And she does matter to him. There's a great moment. It's kind of that like, I don't know. There's a lot of really warm moments in this movie, despite the violence and despite Paul Greengrass can always give that sort of momentum to an action scene or a scene of violence. And there's a couple scenes where I just think they're brilliantly shot and staged and edited. That shootout amongst those rocks was really nerve-wracking. Don't you think, Ronald?
Yeah, absolutely.
You need to be writing something down.
Yeah, sorry. It's. Yes, it was very action packed and crazy. So,
News of the World. I guess we liked it.
Yeah,
but should you go to the theater to see it? No. Wait until it's at home. But I think it's in theaters on Christmas Day. Is that not correct?
Yeah.
So maybe you should go to the. Boy, this is weird. They let us see a screener and we're hyping it, but I guess do what you will.
Go see it.
In
your house. Go see it and get out of your bed and go see it. Oh, PVOD.
Just finally, I didn't realize we would have a conflict of interest, but I just realized we do with these theatrical ones. But I mean, if you're like renting out like one of those bubble, I've seen these different performances where everyone's in a bubble, or you can maybe there's some super safe theatrical experience. But anyway, maybe I'll be editing this out. At any rate, we liked the movie. Good job, everybody involved.
You all did so good. Yeah, I was reading about this distribution plan. So it's in theaters, but I saw that there's some sort of partnership where Netflix has the international rights for it.
Oh no!
So they're handling the international release sometime in 2021. Cool. But it's also interesting because it sounds like you guys really liked it. I can't wait to see it. But I mean, I'm curious. I don't know that it's been actually promoted, or even we could probably ask our publicity contacts. But it's a Universal Pictures film. So I'm curious if they have if they're going to do the same thing with this, where they have, it comes out and then 17 days later it'll be on PVOD. So, those that aren't ready to go to the theaters, there's a good chance that maybe in that first week of the new year, maybe you can check this out at home, as John and Ronald have recommended you do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what else? Have you both seen Freaky? I know John did.
No, I haven't seen Freaky, but I really want to know about it.
So tag me in, Ronald, and I'll talk about it with John.
Yeah.
So you're to my right. So I go like
other side, Ronald.
There we go.
Oh.
No. For me he did it right. That's right. Yeah. It's gonna look horrible, but it was fun
because we're not gonna be side by side on the video. Yeah, but what did you think of Freaky?
Like,
I mean, it's both like a Vincent. I was about to call him Vincent Vaughn. I don't know what's
it's too fun. It's too fun. I think you're below one of us. I'm in a box, a glass case of emotion.
Yes, folks. We have just discovered there's fun to be had. With little video boxes.
Freaky.
But yes, freaky. I mean, it's both a Vincent Vaughn film and kind of an attempt at sort of a horror comedy. So I feel like those two things kind of blend together. Like he doesn't get a chance to be like his usual self that much in this movie, but he has a few moments because of the performance aspect of switching. I mean, the whole plot is that he switches personalities with a teenage girl, and so he gets some kind of comic moments of being the big hulking Vince Vaughn that he is, and talking like a teen. But I don't know. I thought it was kind of an interesting role for him. Like I don't know how much he had to do with I feel like he does movies that he produces now, and I don't know, was he involved on the creative side or was he just an actor in this? But it was an interesting part for him. And it definitely has some things going for it in terms of the sort of comedy that it's trying to be. What were your overall thoughts of Freaky?
I actually thought it was great. I loved it. I really like Chris Landon. He did both Happy Death Day films. He also wrote a bunch of the Paranormal Activity sequels. But he's like a Blumhouse guy. Like he does a bunch of work for Blumhouse, and I pretty much have liked most of what he's done. But I just like the idea of what this is basically, like you said, it's kind of got a mix of like a standard Vince Vaughn comedy, along with like a high school kind of coming of age type thing mixed in with a slasher film. And it basically just sends all the tropes up and is like, super meta and talking about itself and the whole idea of a body switch. It's just, I just think it's a really fun mix. And I think that the characters in the movie are pretty funny. Obviously Vince Vaughn is, I think he's pretty hilarious personally. And I think you guys do too. But I think really, I think she was in one of the Paranormal Activity movies with him, but Catherine Newton I thought was great in it. The female lead in the movie. But it's just like it's like a great mix of the kind of things that I know we talk about a lot that I just like genuinely love. It's like that high school fun slasher movie mixed with like Freaky Friday, and it's just, it's like you got to be okay with it. The movie, if I was thinking one thing, it moves quick. There's really no set up for what happens in terms of the body switch or the body swap. It just happens. And
there's one little tiny bit of setup, but only so that you might recognize the props. You recognize that it's some kind of collector's item, this device that allows them to switch.
Sure.
But you're right. There's no explanation, which I felt like I was kind of glad that it was really elemental and that there wasn't some character who comes in to explain the magic or anything like that. I thought that was, but you're right. That
you mean they don't go to the library like in Sinister and talk to Vincent D'Onofrio and he gives them the whole story?
They don't find an old book. Well, they kind of do the old book thing.
Yeah, they do.
I guess. I was giving it more credit. I was just reviewing the plot in my head.
And
I saw
as you talk through it,
yeah. But no, I think that you're right. But it's both sending up those tropes and kind of saying we're going to move fast because we are this mashup, this genre mashup, that we don't really have to have the slasher part be too worked out, or have the body switch part be too worked out, or even have the characters be too worked out. It's more that like within the first few minutes, you're surprised at how quickly things get grisly. And also I thought that I thought it was going to be full of grisly deaths after that opening scene. That opening scene is kind of there to show you that they're not kidding about the death, but I feel like they're never that mean or that shocking again in terms of the characters that get killed. It's never quite as rough. Like there's two killings in the first scene where it's like it's just real gross and physical and and it's kind of saying to you, okay, this is, yes, people are really going to die. Vince Vaughn is really going to be like throwing around kids in this movie. But I don't know. I mean, I think you're right that it works. Like I said, it has a lot going for it in terms of the different things it's trying to do. And I could see a lot of like, this almost feels like, again, sad to say, this feels like a great like midnight screening kind of movie. Like you'd be, a lot of reaction moments.
And I feel like this is one, like, honestly, like I feel the same way about Happy Death Day where like something that I kind of go back to and watch just casually because it's a nice like cinematic meal to me. Like it's not like something deep, it's a nice like snack. It's a nice like bowl of ice cream or something. If I'm trying to find the right thing because it's just like it's so quick, but it's so good and it's just a lot of fun. Like I just love the idea of this horror. We talked about a couple episodes back. We were talking about horror comedies and like it's kind of like pegging down what some of them are. But like this one is a really great example of one that mixes these genres together, I think, very well. And I mean, I think there's some really cool shots. I love the shot of her going back to the school for the first time after the body swap. Like you have like this slow-mo confetti shot of like it almost looks like a princess entrance type thing, but then the music cue changes and like things aren't right. Things are different with this character. And I think that whole like that shot was pretty awesome, I thought. Or at least it stood out to me. Yeah, I don't know. I thought Freaky was a lot of fun. It's another, speaking of Universal, this is one of their titles that they did, they didn't really promote it a whole lot as a PVOD option, but it did its theatrical, came to PVOD, and that's how we saw it. But I would definitely recommend it if you're, horror comedy fan, horror fan, slasher fans, Vince Vaughn fan, Catherine Newton fan. Yeah, I thought it was really fun. Yeah. Definitely recommend it.
I mean, I definitely think if it sounds fun after that description, then you probably know exactly what it is. I mean, that's the one thing you can say about a movie like this. It kind of is what is advertised, and it hits all those.
Yeah, I mean, and even in that opening sequence, like it's like kind of, talking to like Scream and like the slasher movies, even the more modern slasher era, pretty obviously, and then it kind of dovetails into this body swap horror high school thing, which I think works really well. Once these characters switch bodies, and I think it's really funny, especially Vince Vaughn playing a high school girl. I thought that was hilarious.
Right.
And the movie,
if you're worried if he does too much of, like, he doesn't like make her cartoony or anything. He just kind of plays the slightly like flighty aspect of a teenager, and the slightly less grounded kind of personality, less world weary or something. But if you're worried he's going to do like a kind of a mincing performance that's kind of misogynistic, that's not what it is at all. It's almost like a genuine attempt to evoke. I don't know. I think, he might be a little underrated as an actor. I know that people have their own reasons for feeling whatever way about him. I've loved so many things that he's done. But I do think that he is ultimately, when you think back to why he's a star, it's, that guy we saw in Swingers, he's got that quality, and he can just bring a certain kind of zing to a line reading or to a role. And I do sense a certain amount of his humor in the way this is put together, but it does not have the marks of kind of like it doesn't feel like an improv bro comedy sort of thing, like he normally does. So it's not quite on brand, but it does have his humor intact. So
yeah. Cool. What else?
Well, we were going to mention Unhinged, which is another movie where an actor that we know is playing sort of a villain in a slasher type scenario. But I mean, I think there's a lot you could say about Unhinged, but I also think you could just talk about it like a very elemental movie. I don't know. This one really, I mean, this one really got me thinking in a lot of different ways. I mean, both in terms of the quality of the movie and what it's really trying to do, and also just the pulse pounding nature of it, and some of the action in it is amazingly shot and edited. I don't know. This movie really kept surprising me, even as I realized what it was doing, and it never really veered from that path. It would still surprise me with like some of the beats and some of the rhythms of it. It's relentless.
Yeah. I don't know how I felt about the movie. I do agree, like a lot of the action sequences, and there was a lot of like tense moments, and I think in general I actually really like Russell Crowe in the movie. In general, I think he's pretty great in general in most movies that he's in, but this is a little bit of a different character for him, and it's a little, and then, like you said, it can kind of come off as like almost like a slasher revenge type thing, but he's genuinely scary in this movie.
Yeah, he really is. I mean, that's one of those things that works so well about this movie, is that he really is scary. And the fact that the movie's got this, it's almost miserable though to go through this experience with these characters. Like if Freaky was a lot of fun, this movie does not have, it's not fun.
Right. And it's almost like some of the things I have issue with, like, these characters get into situations that it's like this, the constant conversation about like logic and like, you know, in it, getting yourself in a situation and staying in it. Like, some of the scenarios in the movie, like where the mother and son are like that they're in together. I had trouble kind of sticking with them still being in that situation. Like they're, you know, in terms of like, I don't know, logic, I guess is what I'm thinking. But I think the big takeaway for me though, going back to the Crow performance, is really what is so scary about that person and that performance is that like, that is so many people in the world. You know, we've all seen that, this type of person on the road with road rage, or in an environment, in a shopping environment, in a movie theater, you know, just this person that has had, you know, you get this little bit of like, you know, why they're so the way they are, sort of, but that just how scary people can become. And he's just a normal guy, you know, it's like, it's just a guy driving his car, and it's just, and the people on the other side of it, just how unfortunate they are that they happen to bump in, you know, not literally per se, but like kind of like cross paths with a character of that nature, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I really liked his performance in it, and I think overall the movie was okay for me.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know. I think it's such a perfectly constructed concept, but the act of watching it is so, like I said, just kind of miserable. Maybe I'm describing what you're talking about from a different point of view, is that I kept thinking how kind of screwed they were in the moment, and they didn't really have much they could do, but the character does. There are like 2 or 3 moments in the movie you could point to, and you could go, well, would you have to do it that way, or could you not? But in terms of the logic of the movie, they do a good job of showing how in the moment she makes a decision based on what she thinks her options are, and she's flawed. And I think that helps me sometimes with this type of movie to notice that though she is definitely the protagonist, I mean, I think anybody who reads this movie as like somehow vindicating his character's rage at like someone being rude to him, it reminds me of the people that saw Falling Down and thought that Michael Douglas's character was in the right, or someone you should admire.
Absolutely.
I think it would be hard for someone to walk out of this movie feeling like this movie is saying that about Russell Crowe's character. But I know those people, like that angry person you're talking about, they do think that, like, the movie's not really that politicized, but there is a little bit of a sort of, you could sort of guess how these characters would vote, you know? And I do feel like there's enough, it's commenting enough on that kind of rage. That's why I said this movie gave me so much to think about after watching it without even me realizing it, is because I did wonder, was it trying to say something? I definitely think it comes down on the side of Russell Crowe being like a bad guy, and it's not trying to vindicate him, but it does leave hanging this sort of aspect of the mistakes she makes, the mistakes of characters she makes that got her into the situation that she's in. I don't know. It's really tough for me to guess if the movie's really trying to say something broader, or if it's just trying on those bigger themes to seem more important. Because this kept feeling to me like a low budget, like B movie, you know, but it's made with kind of a pedigree, and it's got this like Russell Crowe's involvement, but also the creative team behind it as well. I don't know. There's something unusual about this movie that really warrants seeing, but I don't think many people, because I thought, oh, maybe this would be fun to watch with my wife and son because we watch this kind of, you know, thriller type film. And about 30 minutes into it, I thought, no, this is not going to be that fun to watch with them. Like if it had a little bit more fun in it and a little bit less just the bleakness of it, then I might feel differently about it. But it's not particularly funny, though it does have a little bit of a black humor to certain aspects of it. Yeah, it's mostly down to the performance. You're right. And just how you don't want this guy coming for you. And maybe the fact that I do believe that guy is out there. It does.
Absolutely.
It adds to the effect of the movie that you feel like if you accept some of her logical choices, the idea of how relentless he is and how just he's not going to be stopped and he doesn't care if he dies, it makes him into kind of a slasher character, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Ronald, did you see it? I can't tell from the conversation.
No, I didn't see it yet. I want to. I like Russell Crowe. I like the premise. I like kind of small movies like that. I mean, not to say it's a small movie, but you know what I mean, like the scale of it.
No, it does keep it. Yeah. It does feel I mean, it's got a gritty quality to it. So,
okay, yeah, I'll check it out.
And if you like movies about how ineffectual the police are, this one's pretty solid. Yeah, we could definitely pick at some of those logical choices, Steve.
Yeah.
that she makes. There's even one in News of the World. There's something Tom Cruise. Now I'm saying it. There's something that Tom Cruise said to me about that movie that I thought I'd relay to you guys. That there's a scene in the middle when they go to that town.
Oh no!
Tom
Don't
Hanks
even
reads the news to that town.
Look, man.
I really wonder what he was doing in that moment. Like, I don't know if I bought that character making that injudicious of a choice. I get why he would do that if he was on his own. But I don't get why he did that with the girl in tow, because he's not just endangering his own life, he's endangering her life, and he knew it.
This is what I mean about something is being sprinkled on all the media that's coming out, where people are like, this person's woke and he's going to fight for what's right no matter what. When in actuality, if somebody was in a town full of brutal people, he'd probably be like, this is the greatest man of all time. He slayed dragons. You wouldn't slander a man that had your life in the balance. Yeah. And I think there's something that's happening where, like,
wait, you wouldn't, Ronald, and I wouldn't, but Tom Hanks would.
But Tom Hanks absolutely would. But there's something that's happening where, like, I'm a liberal dude, and there's like this mutation of liberalism that's kind of being sprinkled in all the. God, I sound like I have a tin hat on.
No, you
but you
don't.
know what I'm talking about.
Actually, you're saying the opposite thing. I think if people think you sound that way, if they see the movie, they'll know what we're talking about. Is like a woke character existing in this time feels kind of anachronistic, and so it does feel a little bit like it's a way to make us not feel ambiguous about Tom Hanks. In the movie, it's
the way that people talk about how they will react to history now.
Right.
It's like if I were in slavery, I would have beat up all the slaves. I would have punched them in the face and poor Brian didn't kiss her. It's like that kind of weird revisionist version of history where you feel like you could change things with the scope that you have now and the protection that you have now and the privilege that you have now back in the day. It's very strange. It's hard to watch it sometimes, but overall the movie was great. I'm just saying we're going to find this in a lot of movies for the next like 5-6 years until things get a little more balanced. So, I don't know.
Well, see, I feel like the narrative in these movies has always been that white people were good. So I feel like what you're getting now is like a slightly more realistic depiction of how white people weren't good. And then you've got to throw the one white guy in who like, hey folks, we cannot cancel Tom Hanks's character. Just listen, despite the fact that we know he was fighting for the Confederacy just a few years back. We know that he didn't like it.
He was old and slow. I mean, if it would be the equivalent, Steve, it'd be the equivalent of if you went into like a biker bar and be like, all you bastards are bastards. And I'll beat all you up one at a time. You got to stand up for yourselves. You guys suck. You need to work. You just bike all day. That's what he did in a room full of people that could have destroyed him.
It's like the moment in Green Room when the band plays the anti-Nazi song,
Yes.
The crowd of Nazis. It's like that kind of move.
It's that kind of move where you're like, why are you doing this? Like, what's the benefit of this? You can only be beat up. You can only be beat up and or killed.
Well, he's like, stay low, don't call attention to yourself,
Yeah. By the way.
It's like a political speech.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But there is some cool commentary on news and as how it fits into now.
That which brings us back to Unhinged, which got us on this idea of how are these themes in these movies? Does Unhinged feel vaguely politicized to you too, Steve? Like, did you find yourself thinking throughout that it was almost resisting making any direct association either way so that it wouldn't seem that way? But then did you notice in the last shot the crane moves up and there's an American flag hanging there? Did you catch that? Like, I actually did think, okay, that can't be an accident. So therefore this movie does want us to feel that it's saying something about like rage in America, but surely it's not suggesting that like that she could have made peace with this man. You know what I mean? Because it never seemed like it was really possible. If anything, the moral is like, just be nice to everybody because they might turn out to be a psycho that tries to ruin your life, Yeah. But it's not like saying,
to live by.
Right. But that's a weird lesson when someone's a maniac to be like, you should reach out. You should really be more, you should listen more to the guy who's yelling at you, Anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's almost kind of victim shaming too. It's like, hey, why don't you flip this around? This attacker, you should.
Unhinged is kind of victim shaming the movie, except for the fact that, like I said, I don't think you're supposed to like Russell Crowe at all. By the way, is that all him, or is that's some?
Oh, that's all him.
That's all him. Wow.
Oh yeah,
he's been that way for a little bit.
I mean, I knew that he was, but
he is.
All right.
You talk about his robotic arm?
I'm talking about his the hair color. I was like, is that really his hair
Oh,
color?
okay. Gotcha. It's the fact that he has brown shoes on every scene. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I know.
It was a choice.
Not even in season.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
All right. Well, that's all I got this week.
Yeah, there's 3. 1 or 2 available now. 1 available Christmas Day.
Yes.
In theaters.
Get
at
in a
least.
bubble and roll down to the theater.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you
book out a whole screen for yourself, but then still don't do that.
Yeah.
Have any of you guys seen Fat Man?
No, I started to watch that and I haven't finished it yet.
I
You talked about it last time though.
No. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, no, you mentioned it last time. I wanted to, and I started to watch it. Just haven't finished it yet, but yeah, I need to check it out. I think I'm going to like it though. However, for how far I am into it now, I think I love him.
He's so
great.
good. He's such a jerk at it.
Oh my God, he's so good.
Yeah.
All right, well, there we go. Dude, before we wrap up, do you guys have anything else you want to mention quickly that you watched? Any other series, shows, movies?
I'll hold it till next
things
time.
of the nature.
Yeah,
of the nature.
I think I'm good. I wanted to thank everybody that watched the interview that we did for Run, the director and the producer of the movies. Yeah, just incredible reaction. I mean, like, we couldn't have asked for a better response. And, through whatever, I'm glad that people were able to see it. Yeah, so that makes me super happy. Thank you.
Yeah, it has encouraged us not just to hopefully get more interviews in the future, but the fact that if you're watching this on video right now, that's because a lot of people watched our Run clip. So I don't know what the
apparently
likelihood
people watch YouTube a lot.
Yeah,
that's what it seems.
Yeah.
It's kind of popular. Who knew?
Yeah.
I know, man. And technically, right now, every day's a Friday. If you think about it, you can kind of make every day a Friday when it comes to COVID, if you want to.
Yeah.
If you want to. Yeah. So thank you. We really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week with some more news, reviews, other things relating to the movies and TV. I don't really know. I don't know that we have a plan for next week yet. I don't know. It'll be 2 weeks before Christmas. Insane.
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah.
But I mean, wow. Okay, so that's something. That's something. But yeah, either way, we'll be back next week.
Absolutely.
For sure. I want to thank you two because this has been kind of wild to think about us doing these every week since this whole thing started. It's been something that has kind of definitely been a bright spot of my week. I'll say, and
absolutely.
I know we were like, we were doing our best to kind of do these as often as possible every 2 to 3 weeks, when we were doing them in person and meeting up. And I think this has been like a silver lining. I've had a couple silver linings of this whole pandemic experience, and this is definitely one of them. So thank you guys very much for kind of, everybody being flexible, trying to make it work every week so that we can record these. And especially now trying to, get onto the YouTube side of it and hopefully find some more viewers, listeners, however they choose to listen to the Movie Schmovie podcast. It's awesome. So I'm really happy about that. We're at movieschmovie.com, facebook.com/movieschmovie, movieschmovie@gmail.com, youtube.com/movieschmovie. Damn, look at that.
Steve, you should just start telling people where they can't find Movie Schmovie.
We're not on Disney Plus.
We're not in theaters.
You're not in theaters.
We're not in theaters.
We're
not on PVOD.
Yeah.
We're free. We're free VOD, actually. If you just find us, we're there. But yeah, we'll be back next week, and we'll talk soon. As always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.